So our next presentation is by Katherine Barrett and Richard Greene. So over the course of over 30 years, Katherine Barrett and Richard Greene, who are the principals of Barrett and Greene Incorporated, have researched, analyzed, and written about state and local governments. They're nationally known authorities in a host of topics, including budgeting, finance, human resources, workforce management, tax system, data use, and especially performance management. Early 2020, their latest book, Making Government Work, The Promises and Pitfalls of Performance-Informed Management, was published by Rowman and Littlefield. So let's give them the floor, the screen, whatever. And I believe that you know, you'll find their presentation very valuable, and this is their book. So it is as far as I'm concerned, it is the most readable book on performance. It's out there, the book that is most relevant to practice. So thank you. So Katherine, Richard.
Terrific. Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's kind of you to hold up our book. We'd like to think what we bring to this game and to the symposium today is a little bit of historical knowledge. There's a great deal of historical knowledge among the panelists and the various sessions. We've been working at this field for the better part of 32 years, 33 years, something like that, during which time we've interacted with and observed what's happening in the performance management field in all 50 states, in all the large cities in the United States of America, and in most of the large counties. We haven't kept quite as close a track on the counties, but we've kept track on a number of them. When we first started down this path, we were introduced to the field by the likes of Harry Hattrey, Jay Fountain, Jonathan Brule, and John Kaminsky, who everyone will grow more acquainted with subsequently when he gives a keynote address today. All of them were pioneers in the field. And on the basis of their work, we became zealots. And we thought, gee, all you needed to do was measure things and the world would turn on its head. And then it turned out that wasn't so true. Clearly, the extreme view that we initially held when we were naive and young and believed that the world could change on the course of a dime and on the course of a new technology or new effort wasn't rooted in reality. As the years passed, we saw many programs develop and then fail to continue and then pop up again. We saw the frustration of getting elected officials to pay attention and getting managers to buy in. Many of the issues we saw at the state and local level were paralleled by the issues over the course of time with the GPRA, but we're still optimists that done properly, performance management can make a huge difference. It makes a difference when performance information is actively used to drive policy and improve services. There are lots of obstacles, though, that keep performance management functioning in an optimal way. Katherine?
Sure. You know, so much of the fascinating conversations this morning have been about the big picture and setting up the systems. We're really going to talk about what we've seen on the ground. Rich said we're optimistic. We are. Here's one quick example of how New Orleans used data to manage, understand, and prioritize service delivery. And that's a key way we're now seeing performance management in action. We couldn't agree more with Dr. Shark about the importance of data to this exercise. So we'll give you a little of the New Orleans example. In that city, a 2014 fire tragically took the lives of 5 people, including 3 children. And it was in a house that did not have smoke detectors. And the idea of people at the time was that the smoke detectors, if they were there, could have saved the children and their parents. The fire department was faced with a conundrum, and it was a conundrum that they were able to start to solve with data. They were giving out smoke detectors for free, but many homes still went without. To deal with this problem in 2015, a performance team started analyzing data on where fires were occurring. And they discovered through the data, through their performance measurements, that often places where elderly residents and children live. And so that's what they decided to prioritize. The city used that data to single out the homes at highest risk. Staffers focused their attention on visiting those places and optimized the chances that these residents would be more likely to accept the free detectors. And there was a payoff. A few months later, a fire broke out in one of the houses that had received a free smoke detector, and there wasn't a single fatality, demonstrating the value of the data to the fire department and ultimately the safety of residents who were now much less likely to lose homes or live or their lives to an errant match. One other benefit to this was that it won over the fire chief. The fire chief, who had seen performance measurement as a bother, now saw really its worth. We love stories like that, and there are a great many of them. But it's a mistake to assume that all performance data automatically translates into cleaner, happier states or localities. There are lots of obstacles that keep performance management functioning in an optimal way. And for example,
I think this is a little bit unfair because Katherine gets to tell you good news, and now she hands it over to me to tell you some negative things. But one of the issues, one of the challenges is that an overabundance, and we see this all over the place, an overabundance of performance measures and data points can usually and often leave the potential users drowning in far more information than is remotely reasonable. And again, going back to what Dr. Sharp was saying, technology may be one of the answers to this, one of the aids in solving this. I'll tell you a story about Inger Brink. Many of you in the audience may be familiar with her. She ran Results Washington beginning at the end of, I guess it was May of 2017. At the end of that period of time, departments would prepare in-depth slideshows to share a selection from 192 distinct performance measures that were collected. But only one or two of the measures would be discussed at each meeting. As she told us, and I'm going to read here because I want to quote her properly because we're journalists by training, if researchers by instinct. In 2017, we only discussed 20 measures. That's 20 of the 192. We only discussed 20 of the measures, which were brought forward to the governor. We had a high volume of measures, but not the capacity to do something with them. The agencies would spend a lot of time putting together those presentations. Then everyone would go back to their offices and continue with their daily work.
Now, well, similarly, New York City's frequently cited mayor's management report most recently ran 339 pages. It included some pretty pictures, but we have friends who can't wend their way through a 300-page best-selling novel. Naturally, this document wasn't intended to be read from cover to cover, but for anyone interested in a citywide overview, it's a pretty hefty tome. In our observations of how this works, it's been important, and we think the key is to prioritize what you're aiming for, being careful at the same time in reporting the information that you're not just publicizing positive information, but really publicizing the whole picture, the negative and the positive.
Currently, all 50 of the states, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of positive information now, all 50 of the states, all the largest cities, and all the largest counties are engaged in some form of performance-related endeavors, at least to some extent. There's a wide spectrum of the skill and capacity with which they do it, but they're all at least trying. But there have been many ups and downs along the way, and that will likely continue to be the case. The lack of sustainability of individual performance measurement systems has to be one of the biggest pitfalls. For example, Minnesota and Maine and Oregon and many other places have all seesawed from role as resolute funders of this work to places where successful programs have been eliminated, and in some cases, new ones have popped up to take their place. Sometimes we've talked with city leaders who proudly tell us that they're just beginning the city's first efforts in performance management. And we know, but they don't, that a similar initiative had taken place 10 or 20 years before.
As time passes, historical knowledge about performance measurements and the positives and negatives of both those experiences are lost to current practitioners. Just a few months ago, we were talking to folks in a large Texas city, which we won't name here. They told us that the first time they had used performance measurement was around 2005. And this was the performance measurement chief. We had actually praised that same city for its better than average efforts in this area in the early 1990s, when we were giving speeches at the biannual performance management conferences being held at the LBJ School of Government at the University of Texas. We want to cite one more danger point that we see in this field. one of the words that's most frequently used in connection with performance management is accountability. Sometimes we feel, and we know we're not alone, that the emphasis on accountability tends to drown out the emphasis on getting to better performance. Certainly, accountability is a good thing and has been the key to many of the so-called STAT programs that gained favor in the first decade and a half of the 21st century. But one of the problems that hurt the effectiveness of some of these programs is when the desire to hold individuals or agencies accountable for the actions turned into a gotcha exercise.
We saw an extreme end of this kind of activity years ago in connection with one of the pioneers in that field, which was New York City's CompStat program. Our daughter was then in the early years of playing soccer, and we like to draw in our work from everything we see in our lives, and our daughter's soccer was mostly what we were doing in those years. Her coach was lieutenant in the New York City Police Department's narcotic division. He was really a tough guy, and he was accustomed to chasing down bad guys in the middle of dark streets in the middle of the night with a gun in his hand. But when he told us about his experiences, and we were really curious about this because we were kind of covering the kind of stuff he was doing, he told us that when the data in his district showed a less than favorable story the night before those meetings, he wanted to throw up. He never said he actually did throw up, but he wanted to throw up. This was, as it happens, the first time we heard anything other than positive programs about the CompStat program, which had actually landed the chief of police on the cover of Time magazine, which didn't help him parenthetically with his continuity as chief of police when Mayor Giuliani wanted to be on the cover. But it wasn't unique. We've since heard about the tensions that the STAT approach has sometimes produced. And when we were working on our book, the one Mark kindly held up, we heard that a great many governments were shifting to a somewhat kinder and gentler approach.
And now, with our time drawing to a close,
Yeah,
and
2 minutes, okay?
2 minutes,
We're good.
we
We're good.
got
We
it.
got this time.
Okay, we just wanted to take something from the chapter in your book and just highlight some of the things that we along the way. One is that the key to success in this field is the recognition that performance management isn't an adjunct to what you do. It's not an extra. It has to be part of the whole fabric of what an agency does. We learned that narrative explanations and storytelling needs to accompany data and measure. Data and measures are absolutely important, but they can't just stand alone. In communication to legislators, it has to be simple and to the point. Networks help. Talking to peers about what they're doing, just as we're doing in this conference, is vital. And building an organized structure so that data measures and evaluations can be easily located, both internally and externally, is really critical.
And another one is be cautious about using incentives or rewards for achieving targets, and think twice before setting targets in the first place. When they're overreaching, they can leave government employees disappointed and less inclined to be involved in the process in the future. You need to train the workforce and the whole workforce, not just the people at the top, but all the way through to understand the value of what they're doing. And of utmost importance, fight to get buy-in up and down the ranks for performance management efforts. Staff resistance can cause all sorts of problems. As a result, employees need to know that performance management is useful to them and has the potential for moving toward better results, ultimately making their jobs more satisfying. Thank you. And Mark, I believe we did 9 minutes and 55 seconds. So we have 5 seconds to go. We yield the floor to you.
Well, thank you very much.